At the bridal expo, my brother Julian tried to sell NFT flowers to a grieving widow. Meanwhile, my booth had real bouquets and a line out the door. The look on his face when she said, "This is real floristry? Worth everything." I was arranging a display of late spring peonies when I heard the front bell of the shop jingle. The smell of fresh roses clung to my hands, my sleeves, even my hair. You'd think after all these years, I'd get tired of it, but honestly, it still felt like home. My name is Noah Alvarez. I'm 28 years old, and I live in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. My parents, Camila and Mateo, built this place, the Bloom Bar, for nothing when they first immigrated here from Colombia. Growing up, I spent more afternoons here than at any playground, tagging along after my mom while she arranged bouquets that looked like something out of a dream. It wasn't just a business to me, it was part of who I was. When I was a teenager, other kids spent their summers chasing parties or wasting hours online. Me? I was in the back room with textbooks on botany and floral anatomy, practicing corsages until my fingers cramped. I learned to speak the language of flowers like it was my second mother tongue. Julian, my older brother, had no such interest. He was always chasing the next big thing, an app that would revolutionize meal prep, a crypto token that would change the world, a TikTok agency he swore was about to blow up. None of it lasted. None of it stuck. Still, at every family dinner, Mom and Dad would beam at him like he was already the next Steve Jobs. Meanwhile, I kept the shop afloat when they traveled, picked up slack during slow seasons, poured my heart into every stem and petal, and mostly, I just got nods. Maybe the occasional, "You're such a hard worker, Mijo." That Friday night, the table was set for one of our rare whole family meals. Julian was already there, talking a mile a minute about some influencer marketing event he attended. Dad laughed too loud at his jokes. Mom kept shoving more empanadas onto his plate. I waited for the right moment. I had finished a new seasonal catalog, revamped the shop's Instagram, even secured 2 new event contracts. Surely, tonight they would finally see it. Finally say it. "So," Dad said, leaning back with a satisfied sigh, "we have a big announcement." I smiled. "Ready?" Mom reached across the table to squeeze Julian's hand. "We've decided it's time to start thinking about the future of the Bloom Bar." I nodded, heart thumping. "And we want Julian," she said, beaming, "to take over." I blinked, sure I misheard. Dad jumped in, like he couldn't wait to explain. "He's got the vision, Mijo. He's going to modernize it, rebrand it into a full event experience. Tech integration, AI planning, social media expansions, it's the future." Julian gave me a smug little half-smile. "We're going to call it Bloomworks. It's going to be huge." I sat frozen, my fork halfway to my mouth. The words just kept tumbling out: blockchain flower subscriptions, NFT bridal packages, VR floral arrangements for destination weddings, a blur of buzzwords and startup babble that made my head spin. "Where does that leave me?" I asked, my voice sounding weirdly thin. Mom's smile faltered for half a second before she plastered it back on. "We need someone reliable to handle deliveries. You're so good with the clients, Noah. So dependable." "A driver," I said, flat. Dad nodded, completely missing the tremor in my voice. "Exactly. It's still an important role. And Julian needs you on the team." Julian raised his glass toward me. "Welcome to Bloomworks, bro." The rest of the table lifted their glasses. I didn't move. I stared at the glint of the chandelier above, the glittering glassware, the spread of food, and all I could taste was bile. They weren't joking. They weren't even hesitating. They had handed over everything I had bled for, to the son who couldn't keep a domain name for more than 6 months. And they left me to deliver his glitter-covered silk bouquets in a van with a company logo that wasn't even ours anymore. Later that night, back at my tiny apartment above the shop, I sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing my delivery uniform. The city lights flickered outside my window, blurred through eyes I refused to let cry. I thought about the hours I'd spent learning how to wire delicate stems together, about the late nights designing arrangements that made grown men cry at their weddings, about the stupid hope that maybe this family would see me as more than just useful. I thought about how easily they threw it all away, and deep down, something hard and cold and heavy settled inside my chest. A vow I didn't say out loud, but knew I'd keep. If they didn't want me at their table, I'd build my own. I didn't quit right away. I should have. God knows I should have. But the idea of walking away from the only place that had ever felt like mine, even if it was broken now, made my stomach twist into knots. So I swallowed my pride, put on the new Bloomworks delivery polo Julian had printed up, and showed up for work the next morning. Noah Alvarez, delivery boy. Every time I slipped behind the wheel of the van, every time I heard Julian barking into his Bluetooth about synergy, I felt like a piece of me died a little more. At first, I told myself it wouldn't be forever. Maybe Julian would realize he was in over his head. Maybe Mom and Dad would come to their senses. Maybe, loyalty still meant something. I was wrong. Julian stormed in that first week with a PowerPoint presentation and an ego the size of the whole city. His first order of business? Rebranding the brand. Real flowers, he said, were unsustainable and outdated. He ordered pallets of artificial stems, plastic monstrosities that smelled like chemicals, and left the whole back room reeking of factory glue. Then came the floral NFTs, a gimmick he cooked up where people could buy digital flowers instead of actual arrangements. "Why buy a bouquet that'll die in a week?" he said loudly one day, grinning at the staff, "when you can own a blockchain floral collectible forever?" The veteran clients, the ones who had been coming to the Bloom Bar for years, hated it. Mrs. Crane, who had ordered monthly centerpieces for her law firm since I was in middle school, sniffed at the samples Julian laid out. "Plastic," she said, eyebrows drawn together like thunderclouds. "Since when did you all turn into Party City?" Julian laughed it off. "Times are changing. Gotta stay ahead of the curve, Mrs. C." She left without placing an order. She wasn't the last. I stayed quiet through it all. I delivered fake flowers to real weddings. I nodded and smiled when clients raised their eyebrows at the neon-tinted roses in the LED lilies. I listened, and I remembered. One afternoon, I caught Marisol, our best designer, stuffing a resignation letter into her bag. She was trembling with anger. "You can't leave," I said quietly as I loaded boxes into the van. "I can't stay," she hissed back. I didn't spend 15 years building a reputation for this place just to be told funeral arrangements are off-brand. I didn't blame her. Not one bit. That morning, Julian had rejected a funeral order, a grieving wife who wanted white lilies for her husband's memorial. He said it was too depressing for the Bloomworks Instagram feed. When Marisol protested, Julian smirked and said, "Don't be so old school. We're about celebration now. Good vibes only." She quit before lunch. I watched her walk out with her portfolio tucked under her arm. No one else said anything. Not Mom. Not Dad. Not even Julian, who just sipped his green juice and refreshed his NFT sales dashboard. Back in the van, I sat behind the wheel and stared at my clipboard full of addresses. My fingers curled tight around the steering wheel until the fake leather creaked. Every client complaint, every returned order, every disgusted glance, I filed them away in my mind like evidence. I didn't lash out. I didn't argue. I took my time. Because if I had learned anything from spending a lifetime in the shadows, it was this. You don't destroy a legacy with a temper tantrum. You dismantle it piece by piece. The day it all exploded started like any other, a headache and a double shift. Julian had overbooked deliveries again, trying to impress some brand consultant he met online. Meanwhile, the real business, the grieving daughters, the nervous brides, the elderly anniversary couples, got pushed down the list like afterthoughts. That morning, I barely had time to grab a coffee before the chaos hit. By noon, my shirt was sticking to my back, and I had already delivered 2 bouquets that looked like reject prom corsages. The real disaster came at 3 o'clock sharp. Her name was Mrs. Callahan, a longtime client, one of those Atlanta socialites who threw charity galas and anniversary parties like it was a competitive sport. She swept into the shop trailing a perfume cloud and an assistant who looked terrified. She barely made it 5 steps in before demanding, "Where's my arrangement?" Julian strolled out of the office like he was the star of some startup documentary. "Mrs. C," he crowed, flashing his 2 white veneers. "So good to see you. Your order is right here." He gestured to a display table. I actually winced when I saw it. Instead of the bespoke, seasonal centerpiece she had ordered, organic gardenias, wild clematis, seasonal white lilacs, he had slapped together a sad little bouquet of glittered eucalyptus, plastic calla lilies, and spray-painted silk roses. The whole thing looked like it belonged in the clearance bin of a Halloween decoration store. Mrs. Callahan blinked at it like it might bite her. "What?" she said finally, her voice sharp enough to slice paper. "Is this?" Julian's smile faltered, just a touch. "It's the new Bloomworks aesthetic. Ultra-modern, ultra-digital. It's what the younger market wants." Mrs. Callahan turned to her assistant and said, in a voice that carried across the entire shop, "Get my car. We're leaving." Julian stepped forward, hands raised like he could salvage it. Wait. We can customize it for you. Maybe throw in a free NFT version of the bouquet? Immortalize your anniversary on the blockchain." Mrs. Callahan didn't even answer. She swept out the door, heels clicking furiously against the tile, leaving Julian standing there looking like he had been slapped. The whole shop went dead silent. You could hear the refrigerators humming. You could hear the faint rustle of dried fake leaves on the counter. And then Julian did what Julian always did when he got embarrassed. He lashed out. He spun around to the team, eyes wild, voice too loud. "I don't know why everyone's acting so surprised," he barked. "Maybe if you all supported the vision, these clients wouldn't be so confused." No one said anything. Marisol was gone. So were 2 of the part-time designers. The only people left were the high school kid who stocked vases and the barista Julian hired to run a flower and coffee pop-up that nobody asked for. Then he turned to me. "And you?" he snapped, pointing like a bad sitcom boss. Maybe if the deliveries were handled better, people wouldn't come in already pissed off. But hey, What do I expect from just the driver? Something in my chest cracked clean in half. I stared at him, this man who used to be the brother I shared a bunk bed with, the brother who used to push me on the swings when we were too little to know better. And all I saw now was a spoiled child wearing our family's dreams like a cheap costume. Without a word, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the van keys. I walked forward, the sound of my boots loud in the hollow, ugly silence. Julian straightened up, maybe thinking I was coming to apologize. I set the keys down on the front counter. Nice and easy. Like I was setting down a body. Julian opened his mouth to say something else, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned my back on him, on all of it, and walked out into the heavy Atlanta air, not bothering to shut the door behind me. I didn't look back. Not when he yelled my name. Not when Mom called my phone 3 times in a row, the screen lighting up in my pocket like an accusation. Not even when I heard the jingle of the shop bell one last time, as the door swung closed behind me. I was done being Bloomworks' delivery boy, and they had no idea yet, but I was just getting started. The first few days after I walked out of Bloomworks, I didn't know what to do with myself. It was like someone had taken a sledgehammer to the center of my chest. I kept reaching for the van keys that weren't in my pocket anymore. Kept thinking about the orders I wasn't filling, the bouquets I wasn't arranging. But underneath all that, underneath the numbness and the anger, there was something else stirring. Something sharper. Something alive. I wasn't going back. That door had slammed shut. Now it was time to figure out what came next. It started with a text from Marisol. Marisol. You serious about leaving for good? Me. Yeah, I'm done. Marisol. Good. Let's meet. We got coffee at a tiny cafe down a side street that smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread. She wasn't alone. Arturo, another designer who had quit after Julian banned traditional funeral arrangements, slid into the booth beside her. You planning on just freelancing? Arturo asked after we ordered. I shook my head slowly. No. I'm planning on starting something better. Marisol leaned in, her eyes gleaming. Then you're going to need help. We spent the next 3 hours scribbling ideas onto napkins, sourcing seasonal blooms directly from local farms, using real floristry techniques, telling human stories through every arrangement. No NFTs. No glittered eucalyptus. No gimmicks. Something real. By the end of it, we had a plan. Finding a space was harder. Bloomworks had taken over the best storefronts in downtown. I didn't have the money for anything flashy anyway. But then Arturo's cousin mentioned a little alleyway off Edgewood Avenue, hidden behind an old bookstore, barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass side by side. There was a former print shop there, abandoned, dusty, forgotten. It was perfect. The rent was dirt cheap. The floors were cracked concrete, and the windows stuck when you tried to open them. But standing there in that dusty little shell of a building, I could already see it. Not a store. A studio. A place where flowers told stories again. We named it Alba Flora. Alba for dawn in Spanish. New beginnings. New growth. We didn't put up flashy signs or hire influencers. We just started working. Every bouquet was handcrafted. No 2 arrangements were alike. We sourced blooms seasonally, paid farmers fair prices, built designs that felt like memories, a grandmother's garden, a spring morning after rain, the way your chest feels the first time someone says, I love you. Word spread slowly at first. A few old Bloom Bar clients who had followed Marisol's work on Instagram, a local wedding planner who heard we were the real deal. I kept my head down and let the flowers speak for themselves. One afternoon, about a month after we opened, I was clipping lilacs for a bridal bouquet when the front door chimed. A woman stepped in, clutching her purse nervously. Are you Noah Alvarez? I nodded. I used to order from your family shop, she said quickly. But lately, it's different. It's not what it used to be. She hesitated. Someone told me you're the one who made the old arrangements. The ones that actually meant something. I set the clippers down gently. You're in the right place, I said. That night, as I swept the dusty floor after closing, I realized something. I wasn't building a business to compete with Bloomworks. I was building a home for everyone Julian had forgotten. And I was just getting started. It took a few months, but Alba Flora started to catch fire. Not the viral, flashing lights kind of fame Julian always chased. Ours was the kind that spread in whispers. The kind that showed up when a grieving widow said, this is exactly what he would have loved, or when a bride started crying just seeing her bouquet. And somewhere along the way, word reached the wedding circuit. That's how we ended up at the Atlanta Bridal Expo, the biggest one in the city. Marisol, Arturo, and I spent weeks prepping. We didn't have the budget for giant displays or massive LED screens like the big companies. We barely managed a 10x10 booth. But we made every inch count. We built a flower wall by hand, real flowers, still dewy, not a single plastic stem in sight. We filled the air with soft honey and citrus scents from fresh-cut blooms. We designed small sample bouquets for guests to touch, smell, hold. Every arrangement had a story attached to it, printed on little cards. For the bride who still writes love letters. For the couple who met on a rainy day. By the time the doors opened, we were exhausted, but ready. I was adjusting a vase of wild poppies when I heard a commotion near the entrance. People were craning their necks, a few pulling out phones. I looked up, and there he was, Julian, in a fitted designer suit that probably cost more than our whole booth. He waltzed into the expo like he owned it, two assistants trailing him carrying LED screens and portable speakers. The new Bloomworks booth was ridiculous. Digital frames flashing virtual bouquets. Fake greenery hanging from metal structures. Screens blaring slogans like Floristry Reimagined. Own your love forever, digitally. It looked more like a tech trade show than anything remotely romantic. Julian strutted around, shaking hands, laughing too loud, posing for selfies with the influencers he had dragged along. His booth screamed for attention, but the funny thing was, it wasn't getting much. People glanced at it, took a few quick photos, then wandered away, their faces blank. Meanwhile, Alba Flora's booth kept filling. At first, it was just curious glances. Then a few brides-to-be came over to smell the air, to touch the velvet softness of real petals. Then a couple asked if they could sit down and just breathe for a second, away from the chaos. And then, the moment that changed everything. A woman in her 40s, elegant in a simple green dress, stood in front of our booth for a long time, looking at one of our sample bouquets. I recognized her instantly, Mrs. Larson, one of the Bloom Bar's oldest and most loyal clients. She picked up the card attached to a bouquet of ivory garden roses and jasmine. For the anniversary where the words aren't enough. She smiled, a real smile, the kind that creases your eyes, and said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Now this is real floristry, not whatever that other place has become. Heads turned. Whispers started. I didn't even have to look to know Julian had heard her. When I finally let myself glance across the expo floor, I saw him standing there, frozen, one hand still clutching a half-empty glass of champagne. Our eyes locked across the room. For the first time in my life, the first time in our lives, Julian didn't smirk. He didn't roll his eyes. He just stood there, hollow and small, in the middle of his flashing neon empire of nothing. I turned back to the next customer waiting at our booth, a young woman twisting an engagement ring on her finger, tears shining in her eyes, and handed her a single, perfect stem of sweet pea. We didn't need LED screens. We didn't need hashtags. We had something Julian could never buy, code, or fake. We had soul. And now the whole city was starting to see it too. I was packing up a few loose stems at the booth when I heard heavy footsteps storming toward me. I didn't even have to look up. I could feel the anger rolling off him like heat from a busted engine. Julian. He shoved through the crowd, ignoring the curious glances, the phones that subtly lifted to start recording. His face was red, his hands clenched at his sides. You think you're real clever? Huh, he hissed as he marched right up to me. I straightened slowly, dusting off my hands. Hi, Julian, I said, calm as a frozen lake. Enjoying the expo? He didn't smile. He didn't even blink. You couldn't just stay in your lane, could you? He snapped. You had to show up here and humiliate me. People were staring now, openly. A couple of vendors from neighboring booths stopped adjusting their displays. One of Julian's assistants hovered a few feet back, looking like he wanted to melt into the floor. I heard Marisol shift behind me, ready to step in if things got ugly. I gave her the slightest shake of my head. This was my fight. I didn't humiliate you, Julian, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. You did that all by yourself. His fists clenched tighter. His whole body vibrated like a live wire. You always had to make it about you, he snarled. You couldn't just support your family. You had to, what? Start your own thing just to stick it to me. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I said, clear enough for everyone to hear. You're the one who forgot what our family built. I just remembered. The words hung in the air like a dropped match in a dry forest. Someone nearby gasped softly. I caught a few phones angled toward us now, recording everything. I didn't care. I wanted this out in the open. Julian's face twisted. For a second, he looked like he might actually swing at me. But instead, he just jabbed a finger into my chest. You think you're better than me, he spat. I didn't move. I don't have to think it, I said quietly. I know it. Julian opened his mouth, probably to yell something, probably to make another scene, but the crowd was already pulling away from him like he was radioactive. I saw one of the bigger wedding planners, a woman who booked six-figure floral contracts, whispering to her assistant while side-eyeing Julian with pure disgust. Then came the click. The tiny, unmistakable click of someone uploading a video. And another. And another. By the time Julian stormed off, shoving aside a potted palm and nearly knocking over a stand of cupcakes, the damage was already done. Within an hour, the first clip hit TikTok. Hashtag floral family feud. By the next morning, it was everywhere. Clips of Julian shouting. Clips of me standing there, calm, steady, unflinching. Side-by-side comparisons of Bloomworks' fake greenery and Alba Flora's living, breathing arrangements. Comment sections filled with words like disrespectful, cringe, corporate sellout. People weren't just criticizing Bloomworks. They were abandoning it. And for once, it had nothing to do with me being too quiet or too polite or too invisible. For once, the world was seeing what I had seen all along. Julian wasn't a visionary. He was just a hollow man selling plastic promises. And I was just getting started. It was about 2 weeks after the Bridal Expo explosion when the bell over the Alba Flora door jingled softly. I looked up from a sympathy bouquet I was wrapping. For a second, I thought it was another new client. Word had spread fast after the hashtag floral family feud mess, too fast for me to keep up some days. But it wasn't a client. It was Mom and Dad. They stood just inside the doorway, awkward and hesitant, like they weren't sure if they were allowed to be there. Dad had his hat in his hands, twisting it nervously. Mom clutched her purse like it might float away if she let go. They looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe it was me who had finally grown bigger. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped around the counter. "Hey," I said, not cold, just neutral. Mom smiled, that tight, strained smile she used to put on when things weren't going her way. "Me, Joe," she said. "We wanted to stop by, to talk." I nodded once. "Okay." For a moment, none of us moved. Then Dad cleared his throat. "We made a mistake," he said, voice rough like he hadn't spoken those words often. "We thought Julian. We thought he could carry it." Mom jumped in, her words rushing out in a flood. "We thought he had the vision, the energy. We didn't realize. We didn't see what was happening. I waited. No jumping in to make it easier for them. No rescuing. They needed to sit in it." Dad rubbed a hand over his face, sighing hard. "The Bloom Bar's reputation is shot. We're losing clients left and right. Julian." He hesitated, like the next part physically hurt to say. "Julian's talking about shutting it down. Says it's not sustainable anymore." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "We don't know what to do," she whispered. "We need you, Noah." There it was. The words I had waited my whole damn life to hear. I should have felt triumphant. Should have felt victorious. But standing there, watching the two people who had once handed my dream to someone else like it was nothing, it just made me feel tired. I walked back around the counter, pulled open the drawer under the register, and grabbed a manila envelope. I slid it onto the countertop. Mom frowned. Dad's eyebrows drew together. "What's this?" Dad asked. I met their eyes, steady. "It's a proposal," I said. "For what happens next." Mom reached for it with trembling fingers. I didn't move to help her. Inside the envelope was a formal offer. Terms. Conditions. Signatures already drafted. Because if they thought I was going to ride in like a hero and rescue them out of loyalty alone, they hadn't been paying attention. Not anymore. They opened the first page and started reading. Mom's mouth fell open. Dad's face flushed a deep red. "You want to buy the shop?" Dad said slowly, disbelief dripping from every word. "I don't want to," I corrected quietly. "But it's the only way to save it." Mom shook her head, her voice rising. But the Bloom Bar is our legacy." I shrugged. "Then you should have protected it better." For a long, painful moment, nobody said anything. Finally, Dad exhaled, shoulders sagging. "And if we say no?" I folded my arms. "Then you can keep Bloomworks," I said, "and watch it die." They knew it. We all did. Julian had poisoned the well so thoroughly that no amount of Instagram posts or fake apologies would save it now. Mom's hand trembled slightly as she slid the contract back into the envelope. "I never wanted this," she whispered. And for the first time, I believed her. But it didn't matter anymore. This wasn't about what they wanted. It was about what I had built, with no fancy digital screens, no borrowed reputation, no shortcuts. Just work. Just soul. Dad nodded stiffly, like the weight of it all finally settled onto his back. "We'll talk to Julian," he muttered. "You do that," I said. "But the offer's only good for 2 weeks." They nodded, moving slowly, like old paper blowing out the door. When the bell jingled again and they were gone, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. For the first time, they needed me. And this time, it was going to be on my terms, or not at all. 2 weeks later, almost to the day, I sat across from my parents in a sterile bank conference room. The smell of lemon-scented cleaning wipes clung to the air. A lone officer hovered near the door, pretending not to eavesdrop. A notary shuffled papers, waiting for signatures. Dad sat stiffly in his chair, jaw clenched, tapping a pen against the table. Mom kept smoothing down the front of her cardigan like she could iron the whole moment flat if she just tried hard enough. And the manila folder, my proposal, sat between us, thick with the weight of everything they never thought would happen. Mom sniffled quietly. She hadn't cried when we walked into the room, but now, faced with signing away the shop they'd spent half their lives building, the tears finally came. Dad pushed the paperwork toward me with a grunt. "It's done," he said. "Take it." I slid the contract over, checking the signatures. Mateo Alvarez. Camila Alvarez. Signed. Sealed. Final. I added mine at the bottom. Noah Alvarez. No hesitation. No second thoughts. The Bloom Bar was officially mine. Except it wasn't going to be called that anymore. After Mom and Dad left, avoiding eye contact, Walking like they'd aged 10 years overnight, I stayed in the conference room, just breathing, just sitting with it. I should have felt giddy, triumphant, like I'd finally won. But mostly, I just felt ready to begin. The next morning, I unlocked the doors to the old shop. The place was a wreck. Fake greenery still hung from the ceiling like sad, deflated party streamers. Neon signs buzzed weekly. Digital screens flashed outdated NFTs and coming soon promotions for projects that would never happen. I stood in the middle of the showroom, the ghost of my parents' dream and Julian's nightmare flickering around me. Then I pulled out my phone, and I started making calls. By noon, half the fake plants were in a dumpster out back. By 2, the LED screens were stripped from the walls and stacked in the alley for e-recycling pickup. By closing time, every last trace of Bloomworks was gone, stripped down to bare floors, blank walls, raw light pouring through the windows. It felt like a wound, but it also felt clean. A week later, we reopened. Not as the Bloom Bar, not as Bloomworks. We reopened as Alba Legacy, the sister shop to Alba Flora. Same craftsmanship, same soul, but bigger and built with a mission to honor the deep-rooted floral rituals from our heritage. No more fake stems. No more floral NFTs. We filled the shop with real flowers, sourced seasonally, sustainably, and in a way that honored the old ways: hand-tied bouquets, ancestral flower crowns, ceremonial garlands. We hosted classes on floral storytelling, teaching clients how to build arrangements that didn't just sit pretty on a table but actually meant something. On opening day, the line stretched down the block. Not a single LED screen in sight. Just flowers. Colorful. Alive. Breathing. Just the way it should be. I stood behind the counter that day, dressed in a simple linen apron, watching people stream through the door. Watching the shop pulse with life again. Somewhere deep inside, I felt a knot unwind, a knot that had been tied so tightly around my ribs for years that I had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. This was mine now. Truly mine. And I wasn't just rebuilding what Julian had broken. I was building something better, something that would last longer than a trend or a tech gimmick or a flashy rebrand. Something that would outlive all of us. Legacy. Real and blooming. Exactly the way it was meant to be. 1 year later, Alba Flora and Alba Legacy were booked solid 6 months in advance. Our studio calendar was a patchwork of weddings, anniversaries, memorials, and just because bouquets. Every week, new clients trickled in. Some who had followed me from the old Bloom Bar days, and some who just heard the buzz. If you want flowers that make you feel something, you go to Alba. I stopped counting how many people told me our arrangements made them cry. The good kind of crying. The kind that meant we had reached something deep inside them, a memory, a hope, a piece of their heart they didn't even realize flowers could touch. Business was good, but more importantly, it felt right. As for Bloomworks, it didn't survive the summer. After the Bridal Expo disaster, Julian tried to pivot again. He launched some half-baked, luxury silk flower subscription service and a metaverse wedding planning platform that barely made it out of beta. When that crashed hard, he disappeared. Last I heard, he was living in Bali, taking time to reset, according to a passive-aggressive Instagram story someone forwarded me. I didn't follow up. I didn't need to. Sometimes you have to let people fall in love with their own illusions. Meanwhile, Mom and Dad kept their distance. At first, it was awkward, stilted text messages about holidays and birthdays. Then, slowly, they started visiting the shops. Quietly. Carefully. Not to interfere, just to see. One afternoon, I caught Mom lingering by the Alba Legacy window display, tracing the edge of a hand-woven flower crown with her fingers. She didn't come inside. She just looked. And that was enough for me. Some things break too deeply to go back to the way they were. But sometimes, if you're patient, if you're stubborn in the right ways, something new grows in the cracks. Something better. One gray Sunday in March, I found myself alone at Alba Flora, the studio humming with the scent of freshly clipped ranunculus and lemon leaves. The city buzzed quietly outside the door, but inside it was calm. Still, I was finishing a special bouquet for a fundraiser at the local elementary school, deep violet anemones, soft pink hyacinth, tiny bursts of yellow mimosa tucked between. Hope in a vase, basically. As I tied the last ribbon, a little girl from the school ran up to the table, breathless. "Is this the bouquet for our art auction?" she asked, eyes wide. I smiled and handed it over carefully. "Yep, one of a kind. Just like you guys." She beamed so hard I thought she might float off the ground. She cradled the flowers like they were something sacred, something magical. Watching her skip out the door with them, sunlight catching the edge of her hair, I felt a quiet warmth settle in my chest. This right here, was what it was all for. Not the viral fame. Not the revenge. Not even the legacy. It was the work. The heart in every petal. The story in every stem. The way something as fragile as a flower could still say the things words never could. I leaned back against the counter, breathing in the scent of jasmine and possibility, and smiled. This was where I was always meant to be. And for the first time in my life, I knew, deep down, without a single doubt, I had bloomed exactly the way I was supposed to.